Good morning, traders. Welcome to Monday of this beautiful week. Make sure to swing over to ssftg.com/brief to grab your morning brief levels. Before we jump on in, as always, we want to check what news is going on so we know what's going on and when it's going on. We don't want to be surprised by anything. Now, like we talked in the weekly briefing, the monthly briefing, this month's pretty calm as far as news, and today is no different. If we look at the news for today, we don't have anything. It's all small news announcements. Investing.com's 1:30 announcements, they rate as a medium announcement, but I feel like that might be a little bit biased considering this is coming from investing.com. Those ones I really don't care about. At 10 o'clock, we have the CB employment trend indexes. The previous was 97.57. And then after that, we just have some 3 and 6 month bill auctions and then consumer credits this afternoon at 1500. But pretty calm in terms of the news calendar, and well, that's going to be pretty much the case for most of December. So let's jump on in for today, 12/7 of 2020. All right, so first on the list, we've got the NASDAQ, and the NASDAQ, although it did have a nice bear channel to the downside, realistically looks like the buyers are trying to take it higher, right? This bear channel or this bear cycle working its way lower. It came on this gigantic blow off at the lows, right? This huge move. And it just slammed right into those low closes and V-bottomed right out. So this is something that the NASDAQ does love to do, to be fair. But with this movement to the upside and all of this consolidation, we're not seeing any pullback. The market's just going sideways. And that's a very strong indication that we're probably looking for a continuation move to the upside. Upside objectives obviously are going to be back at the, around these 12,530s. There's major resistance up here. But if it is able to break out higher, then it's got a shot up towards the 12,550s, 560s, all the way up there. Now, if the buyers fail here and it starts to roll back over, best bet is probably more of a range than anything else. If it falls all the way back down here again, it's not very likely that's going to spark a huge bear trend. It might. You can't ever say never when it comes to the markets, but it's more likely just going to cause a range-bound scenario. So kind of keeping an eye on how the NASDAQ wants to form, just sort of looking kind of range-bound, but the bulls have a shot here. They just have to actually take it. The S&P is in a very similar situation to the NASDAQ, of course, but the S&P gives us a little bit more clues as to what's going on. We've got an overshot on the lows of the channel that blew off the bottom by a lot. And with that blow off on the lows, they landed down at S1 and reversed right back up, just like we saw in the NASDAQ. We are seeing some nice bull kind of spike in channel or bull flag-ish kind of movement, where the NASDAQ had, basically no room. It was already at the peak. The S&P still has plenty of room. So in terms of upside continuation, or at least potential, the S&P has a lot more space to go. Once we start pushing into the 36, 92 and a halfs, 93s, that's when things might get a little bit choppy because that's the top of that big bear breakout move. Now, just like all the other big moves like that, if it is able to spike above, then we're probably going to be cycling up towards the highs. And then again, best bet is for a range at that point. It's not very likely that if it goes all the way back up to the highs, it's going to go screaming further. It just takes too much. And given what's, or what's not going on today, there's no news. There's no catalyst to really get things going. So the S&P relatively neutral, but the bulls have a shot here to rotate it back up to the highs of the range. And then over to gold, we have a nice little wedge, and the wedge attempted to break down lower. That wedge breakout lower, at least so far, hasn't been very successful at all. It's been a big failure down, hit down to the 1824s, and now we're back up to the highs of that candle. And that's typically what happens when you have these gigantic candles like this. The high and low of them tend to act as support and resistance. If you look back a little bit here to yesterday, we had the same thing. Huge non-farm payroll candle, and that acted as support and resistance, even into today. So everything kind of sticks around those areas. And the fact that this big giant candle has a high right at where the non-farm's low was, literally, right on top of it. This is, I mean, yikes. This looks like the sellers tried to rotate down and failed. And if we start seeing buyers coming back in here, it wouldn't be a surprise at all to see them attempt to rotate back to the highs of that non-farm payroll side of things back up at the 1852s. So it's fairly obvious that the sellers have failed. It wouldn't hurt my feelings at all to see a nice little dip down to like the 29s or 30s, just to see the buyers kind of get in at a better price. It's tough for buyers to want to buy way up here, but the market definitely seems a bit bullish now that the sellers have failed so badly at the lows here. On crude oil, we have a nice descending kind of wedge, almost a channel. They are coming together if you send them out far enough. It's obviously very weak, and this is just a nice pullback overall. The big thing that we're seeing on a lot of the markets here is we had a nice aggressive flush through the lows, and that flush has so far failed, and we're seeing bulls attempting to rotate back up. It's kind of the same story on all of the markets so far. With crude oil, though, we have this really kind of wide, it's hard to really even call it a wedge, but they do go together. So we're coming into the highs of that area as resistance. And not only that, this is a huge zone of structural interest. There's been a lot of stuff that happens around this area. And realistically, now that it broke through and we're back, this seems like a really good spot for potential resistance. If the sellers are going to take it back down, what better location? This is their chance, right? Now, if the sellers fail and they don't get that rotation down, or even if they do, but it ends up being a higher low, that's a really big problem, because then you've got all those shorts who are looking for a drive down to the channel, drive down to S3, get big targets down there, and it didn't make it, and it starts rotating back up on a higher low. That would get a lot of those shorts potentially stuck, and then we might see a pretty good breakout move all the way back up towards like the 46s, maybe even up towards the higher level of respect at around the 46.50s. The euro is starting to feel more like the euro. Just a rocket booster starting to hit full throttle again. Big move to the upside after a V bottom on the lows, just like all the other ones. This one set up in a really funky way, though. We had a lot of really weird resistance on a potential kind of channel high. I say potential because the high was actually over here, and if you draw it like that, nothing ever touched it. So it's this really awkward channel that you can find off of the lows and then put it up on the top. And that's what it skipped off of for a really long time until it finally dumped, and lo and behold, all the way down to the low of that channel, and then rotated back up again. It's almost like they needed to finish this job with how aggressively it hung on to that low. So now that we've broken lower and reversed back out, I'm not necessarily expecting this to have to pull back anymore. Like I said, it feels like they kind of got a job done, kind of a check mark move here. So with the buyers pulling back up into this pivot point, this is a zone of resistance. There's a lot of structural resistance here. We've got big psychological levels around here. There's a lot of stuff happening, but just like the other markets, if the buyers can rally above this, then chances are I don't know what happened there. Chances are we'll see that continuation move to at least get back up to the next level of resistance, in this case for the euro, 1.215 or so. Now, this is the kind of turning point. So if the buyers are going to fail, this is where they're going to fail. And the objective then would be back down towards the lows. So we're in a really big turning point here for the euro. It's just a matter of which way it wants to go. And then finally, on the cryptocurrency side of things with Bitcoin, we've got some fairly decent range movement going on, and it's all inside of a giant candle. What a shock. It's almost like we just talked about that. This humongous bull bar rally to the upside has been the high and so far the low for quite a while. We're building a bit of steam for a possible bear channel, and you can see if we extend that out a little bit further now, and copy paste that gives us a really nice low. So the way that everything is sort of holding up here is trying to get the bulls to come back in. We've overshot the lows, meaning that it's overextended, and buyers obviously picked it up. Otherwise that rejection wouldn't have happened like that. So this drive down, this has me thinking that sellers don't really have what it takes. Even if it does get back down to the lows, sellers understand their weakness here, and they're probably going to take profit down here and cause a stronger rally up. So this is definitely a buy on the lows kind of channel sort of mentality coming into today, especially knowing that we've got all that support coming in around that 19,150. Lots and lots of interest on Bitcoin. It's just a lot of traders are having a hard time wanting to buy it here. We're in the middle, lower third-ish of the range. We're just kind of not in the middle. We're just nowhere. It needs a bit more of a pullback, and then we'll probably see it off to the races once again. All right, well, that's going to do it for today. Like we always say, stay safe out there, keep those stops in play, and let the winners run. I hope you have a fantastic day of trading, and we will see you all tomorrow. Thanks.